Greetings, everyone. It's Izabela over here, greeting you from gorgeous mountains in Colorado for another epic leadership. Leadership, I want to say roundtables, but for another epic session that we're going to be tackling. Actually, very important topic that so many of you, I know deep down, have a big interest in. This is the Leadership Power Hour during lunch break for many of you, and we're going to be talking about how to make a better decision with someone that actually not only learned how to do that, but it's teaching and helping others and actually expanding even further from decision making for better choices, as well as challenging us in a new way. He is master validator, the validator of dilemmas, and a validator solutions, which I cannot wait to depict what that means, why is this so important, and also how this can impact organizations and their teams moving forward in the future. Former Fortune 500 executive who is being also involved in ATech and so many other things. Without further ado, Gregory Keyes is with us. Gregory, how are you?
Hey, good afternoon, Izabela, from rainy, drizzly Rochester, New York. But it's great to see you again.
Fantastic. Great to see you too. I'm so glad we have this chance to depict a little bit on 101 and see why we need to even care about decision making specific right now, right? If we're questioning that, yeah, still, then I don't know. Maybe this is not for you. But before we get into that, do you mind just sharing a little bit about your story? Obviously, you have such amazing background and you've been involved in so many different areas. And we have also Kenneth Cooper here saying hello. Kenneth, I'm so glad you could join us. Thank you so much for being here with us and having an opportunity to also participate and ask some questions. So this is awesome because when we go live, we interact with people like yourself and Yashir. Thank you so much for joining us as well. We're looking forward to hear your comments and questions because this is opportunity for us to learn together. And with the subject matter expert, before we depict how he got into where he got, he obviously had to go through a lot of change and transformation himself. So do you mind sharing some of those early beginnings and things that prompt you to study, first of all, what you decided to concentrate and study on and the career path you took and how the validator factor came into play, please?
Sure. Yeah. Well, prompt me if I forget. But yeah. So I went to college as a computer science student in the fall of 1979, and one of the first classes in the curriculum was problem solving. So and how to teach programmers how to program, but first you've got to figure out, well, what problems you're trying to solve. And so the computer science field is a field of decision making, right? So all day long sitting at the keyboard, if then else. And so, inherently I was a decision maker, even though I wasn't really thinking of myself as a decision maker. And so, yeah, a degree in computer science, mathematics as well, and over 30 years in the medical devices and software industry, primarily. A fair amount of programming early on, and then mostly managing of teams and development of systems later in my career. And so it's like my view on decision making, of course, was changed by the experience. Decision making in the small, if then else, became decision making in the large, and related to where a business was going and how we could employ technology, in my case, mostly software technology, toward what our goals were. And so somewhere along the line, I got acquainted with, actually, I'll say my former boss, Mark Pringle, in 2000 gave me a book called The Innovator's Dilemma, because he knew we would be dealing with the innovator's dilemma as we're trying to take our medical device company into the software world, making that transition from a hardware-based company into a software world. And then, as they say, the rest is history. I've been dealing with the innovator's dilemma since then, and I've come upon or created this term called the invalidator's dilemma, and still trying to place the emphasis. But the word "in" is not there in reality. It's supposed to be silent. It's the validator's dilemma. And thanks to Christensen, I've got I guess, a mimetic title to the story that I'm working on. So anyway, that's kind of how we got here today, Izabela. So what do you think?
That is brilliant, and I love it. And for everybody, I had very often, engineers and engineer minds being applied in such a different ways in the business, and then crossing that border, as I call it, or filling the gap and then creating the bridge, because a lot of times we see disconnect. And I love how you actually brought the science element and then solution, and how problem thinking was always the forefront of everything you've been doing. And right now, don't we see the magnitude of the problems? And now it's like, how do we make it best decisions? How do we make understand what we're exactly trying to solve and how we're solving it? And is it effective? Isn't it, right? A lot of questions, and we would love to hear some of the answers. But I also wanted just to pause quickly here. We're having greetings from Romania. We're also having greetings from Ghana. Thank you, Joseph. Great to see you again. So thank you for everyone. As you guys listening, don't hesitate to ask us questions, because we want to make sure that we're answering all those hard questions and pressing questions you have that is applicable to your current situation. So with that in mind, do you mind sharing, how did you now help teach others, first of all, to be better decision makers, and how our audience can really apply something like that?
Yeah, so I guess my first real sort of confrontation or dealing with this question of decision making beyond the obvious decision making in software code was as a result of dealing with software that wasn't behaving correctly, software anomalies. So it's interesting, Christensen talked about he was always looking for anomalies. And well, I had to deal with software anomalies. And, I guess the quick story was that, we had a process, and we and my team would follow a process, a rigid regulatory sort of framed process for developing software, but yet we would still encounter occasional defects, some of them small and some of them larger than we would like, and requiring action. And, it's like one of those things where you are looking for sort of what the real problem is beyond the problem. Expectation was, was just that a coder miscoded something or a tester missed testing something, but yet our process we found that we were following our process, but yet still having problems. And I guess the root cause that we determined was that some of the decision making that was happening upstream would trickle down, as you'd say, into the actual implementation that we would create. So a lot of time the defect, yes, okay, so the software would be found to be defective, but perhaps some of the decision making upstream was defective. Do we choose the right solution? So, solution can be a lot of solutions have obviously a lot of problems have multiple solutions.
Yes.
And sometimes the quick, first solution, the one that feels right, doesn't always see the bigger picture. So anyway, we sort of learned to stop, assess an impact of the potential change. Well, first it's assess the impact of what happened. Does it need to be fixed? How significant is it? And then the impact of the potential solutions that we would want to implement, whether there was a quick fix that would alleviate the problem immediately, whether there was something significant that required a lot of time, or if there was something in between. So anyway, the design process, although fairly rigid and with reviews and such, but sometimes the stopping to ask ourselves about impact through a more rigorous approach led us to discover things we wouldn't have discovered, and maybe discovered things that are opportunities that we wouldn't have discovered without the probing for true impact.
That is such a good point. And if you don't mind, we're just having a little bit of feedback with your mic. I don't know what's changed from very crisp sound, changed a little bit with the feedback back. But in terms of what we were just talking about, we're seeing also some really great questions here that we can definitely dive in. And you're spot on. A lot of times we tend to just very quickly go into what we think we should do without thinking from high level, how is it going to impact other individuals, other teams, and overall, ultimately the goal and long-term implications, right? And we have to figure out ways how to dialogue, how do we make decisions together, and how we go into that. And we have such a fantastic question here. How do you measure the difficulty of situation when dealing with the decision-making process? And how many inputs have you encountered so far after the greater number? And do you use or decide SW model?
That's software. That's software.
Okay.
SW.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, my techies, please bring it on. Yes.
So I'll take a shot at that. I know that the process of Lean Six Sigma and the idea of assessing critical to quality or critical factors. And I've seen, examples of people saying, well, we have 100 some critical to quality factors or some significant number of critical to quality factors that we're monitoring all the time. And that's great for doing, I guess, what I would say retrospective verification and validation, but for prospective validation is what the concept of e-validation is, that I call it, is something that you just plain don't have time to assess that many factors. So I like to rely on the magical number of 7 plus or minus 2 is the work of psychologist Dr. George Miller, I believe George was his first name, and he talked about this concept of 7 being a magic number, and that's actually goes way back to my computer science training days in the 70s and early 80s. The idea of having about 7 factors for which you would break a problem down into in order to be able to solve it or ask questions about it. So my simple answer is that I think many decisions could be made much more readily if we could frame things in this concept of about 7 different principles to consider. And my story about solving our problem, our software defect dilemma, basically tested that concept of about seven principles. In the medical device software space, we were looking at things like reliability, safety, efficacy, and user experience and such. And our process for assessing impact basically stuck within that fine bounds. And if you think about the quality leader Giran talked about the vital few. The vital few concept will hit about 80% or more of the quality issues is sort of the theory, and that's kind of what we based our process for assessing impact on, was doing just that, and allowing us to ask ourselves about the impact would again surface things that we wouldn't have otherwise. So hopefully that gets to some point of the question, but the number is 7. The magic number it's not 42.
I thought it's a lucky number, so it's a magic number 2. Yay! And I loved because it's questioning what we already know, right? And also helping us to really question our assumptions. And then from those assumptions also to see Are we aligned in what we're actually solving, what the problem we are seeing? Is it even problem, right? And then from which perspective? And you're talking from such an amazing complex level when you are having now technology, software, and the medical devices and precision around them and creation for something that's going to make a life and death situation, right? How do you also combine such a strong, highly regulated industries and bring something fruitful as a product on the end of the day, right? And how much that has to elevate everybody's game in order to do that effectively. And then you transport that into something else, but from the users, from the process of the, he was saying also, do you use a dedicated software to model these processes? What software do you reference to, if you don't mind, or things?
Yeah, so actually that's great. I'm glad you pointed that out. I was thinking about this morning. You know, in the software industry, and the software industry is leading the way, right? So Agile's now become part of the vernacular, and so on. You know, companies that provide software to the software development industry inherently have this capability. But I'll just say a company like Atlassian has a significant tool set for software developers, but they've expanded into, I guess, just general purpose. And it's kind of what was successful for us was actually using a defect tracking system, where in the defect tracking system, and I'll use the air quotes for defect, essentially everything that we were going to do to software, whether it was an enhancement or a defect or an action item, would be entered in our defect tracking system, and then every one of those items in the system would it be assessed according to the impact. So again, back to the reliability, the efficacy, the user experience, and that's the thing. It's a pretty simple model that could be done in paper, it could be done in a spreadsheet, but you know, software tools of today are inherently have this capability. Now, have they supported eValidation directly or not? Well, hopefully soon. But that's kind of the idea, is that you put it into a digital system where it's there. That way you can assess your decisions in advance of your decisions, and then you have that history after you've made the decision. So, you know,
wow.
Keeping track of both good decisions and bad decisions. So if you did something,
and outcomes, right? And you also get a chance to see the outcomes as a result of it, right?
Yeah. So you can plot your success or lack thereof, and then use that as a learning opportunity.
Wow, and it's such a great feedback here that you did answer exactly what he was looking for, so that's fantastic. And I know that some of the concepts might be overhead for a lot of people, because ultimately, again, it's so easy to just think about some small, simple choices, easy choices, that we usually tend to gravitate and feel like we're in charge and we're in control. But the reality is we're not when it comes to such a complexities that we're seeing today. And more than ever, we need to make sure what we're actually doing and why we're doing. Are we doing just because of comfort level, or the easy way out, as people usually always go for the least path of resistance? But isn't it but where this is going to take us? Are we going to ultimately arrive where we need to go, and why we need to look in and seek different level, not only of thinking, but different level of consciousness, right? And elevating different level of skill sets. Right now, what we're seeing is lack of equipment in terms of skill set for leaders to lead and make decisions on things that they've never seen before, that are also terrifying, threatening, right? And who would be so most suitable to talk to with someone who has a background like you do, which is fantastic, to question things from software, from technology piece, from actual output and final product, but also from the service. How we're serving, how we're showing up, what we do with that. So with that in mind, do you mind, Gregory, sharing a little bit how do you think that I'm absolutely thrilled to hear more of, which is this e-validator and that validation dilemma? Because you, through decision making, you're trying to validate is the right decision, I'm assuming, right? So do you mind depicting a little bit about that?
Yeah, so yeah, great question. And again, I was brought up in the arena of quality, where quality is verification and validation. At least that's the way I learned to think about quality. You would verify that you were doing the thing right, and then ultimately you would validate that you did the right thing. And it's kind of like the idea of the waterfall process, where there was like a step-by-step basis to get there. And it was implicit that validation that what you were doing was done, but it in advance, but it wasn't something that was continuously revisited. So as I studied the verification and validation, and I guess it occurred to me that most of the impacts on quality are as a result of decision making upstream. So everybody knows W. Edwards Deming. A lot of people know this guy, W. Edwards Deming, one of the fathers of quality. He actually said something to the effect that only 15% of quality issues could be attributable to the line worker, the person either writing the code or assembling the widget or whatever, and that 85% of the impact on quality was actually from leadership and the leadership decision making. So I thought,
Wow.
please, let's turn the 80-20 model right on its head.
Yes.
And I feel like that's something about Deming that people sometimes maybe got wrong. He was certainly one about doing statistical process control, but he was a little bit of, I don't know, they called him a heretic in one of the books that I read about, because he transformed many industries with his thinking. But I think we got so enamored with the statistical process control and working in that little 15% boundary. And while he was basically saying, no, it's this 85% that's the problem. So that's where I'm focusing this concept of e-validation is basically making leaders of just about everybody and having them participate in this opportunity to influence that 85%. So anyway, that's kind of the concept is, e-validation leads to quality. I've been playing with the idea that e-validation actually leads to equality. So more on that to coming down, but that's the concept. Focus on that 85%, and then back to the tools we were talking about earlier. That's where your measure of that 85% becomes visible. You could actually track that impact.
Wow, you're brilliant mind, and I love what you just shared. So let's just depict a little bit more what you just shared. So I love that 80-20 rule, but also just the fact what we're focusing, and when we're staying skewed in that parameter of 15% or boxed into that way of thinking versus what's happening in that 85. Do you mind sharing some examples and some things, because that is gold, and I really feel like that is what organizations right now need the most, because we're so stuck on how we used to do business, or we're so stuck on certain modalities that actually not serving us anymore. They're not helping the growth. They're not helping transformation. They're not helping impact and influence. We're losing clients because of thinking of old ways, right? Or we're not serving them because what they want and what they need is mismatched. So you are now completely shifting, and I love that you mentioned Deming and others, because a lot of those theories, you were spot on, were maybe good in certain decade of the business. That doesn't mean they're not applicable today, but they're not enough. That it has to be more components to it, because we deal with completely different layer of complexity. Would you share that much a little bit more?
Yeah, it's interesting that the quality industry is focused on this idea of quality 4.0 to align with industry 4.0. And the idea is that you've got a lot of big data, and that you can actually do more data analytics. My fear is that those analytics are still focused on within that, that theoretical 15%. Where, how does the 85% get addressed in this quality 4.0 era? And again, that's the idea being that the 85% comes from digitizing our decision making. I
Yeah.
see that that a lot of companies are having problem with their digital transformation strategy, and I feel like well, to me, it seems obvious that if you're going to try to digitally transform yourself, the first place to transform is within your decision making. And so I feel like that's low hanging fruit that maybe people aren't thinking about. They're thinking about monitoring data coming from customers, monitoring data coming from their devices or from their online software services. When if they digitize their decision making and do their decision making with impact, perhaps that's the first step in a digital transformation strategy.
Wow. And also how much volume of the data is there, but how little it is utilized to lead us and tell us and serve us in decision making. I remember a few years back when I was going on regular meetings with my techies in cybersecurity space and just in technology and ITOs and CTOs and the pain points that they experience, and was always this clash and disconnect from business world, and that business side of the business really never could fully understand. Everybody wanted just to add new technology, but they did not really want to deep dive and figure it out what we do with the current, and also do where we have a gaps and overlaps, and how every environment is having another huge challenge. What we do with the data we already have, because you can a lot of times, and also how we're collecting, how we're streamlining, how we're summarizing, how we're reporting back in something that is meaningful, because we can't compare apples and oranges, can we? So do you mind sharing also how do you balance security with functionality of your own medical devices? This is the question that Dr. Cooper is sharing. So if you don't mind, also how is that applicable with medical devices, but also how is everything applicable and just in general magnitude of data and information, yet lack of assessment and utilization?
Yeah, so that's of course, that's a tough question. That's one that we can certainly go down, dig in deep. So how do you balance the security with the functionality? All right, so again, it comes down to an assessment of impact. So probably one doesn't want to think about this, but there's a lot of legacy devices out there in use in the field today, and those we've heard some stories about the infusion device. Thank you.
Yes.
You for figuring out the infusion device that got hacked. And these devices thought to be impenetrable, suddenly people are finding back doors into them. You think that a legacy operating system, well, who's going to hack that? Well, somehow APIs or whatever backdoors were left open. And I guess it's one of those things that you need to actually assess the risk and assess the viability of the risk, and effectively decide whether that risk is real enough and whether the impact is going to be significant enough. So, I mean, I think the fear is that everything, every device, there's all these legacy devices, and not many of them, there's a bunch of them that don't have cybersecurity capability in them. But the answer, I guess, this is a case of an example of it's not necessarily a do nothing, but is there a mitigation that can be put in place to enable or disable the possibility of the system? So the answer may seem to be put in the cybersecurity software, but the solution could be as simple as defeaturing an exposed port on the device, or closing off an API, software speak, right? Closing off an API so that the system can't be accessed, and that's our mitigation in the short run, while we, in the next generation of devices, actually implement officially cybersecurity software. So hopefully that answer is not being too evasive, but the answer is sometimes do nothing, or do nothing with an alternative mitigation.
And with people that are also not necessarily on that such a high level interacting with the softwares and obviously with the decision making, but day to day, and obviously seeing the risks that are coming from that security and functionality, right? Because on the end of the day, we're all users of different platforms and different systems. And specifically right now, I remember from change management perspective, and I'm sure you've seen this so many times, when we're trying to improve the change or make a decision about the specific change, what are the benefits, right? How we corral people to embrace it so that from user standpoint, they really love what is coming. They're super, super excited, but in the same time, it serves the bigger purpose, which is that security, safety, as well as opportunity to truly tell us the story, things that we really don't have no idea what the data itself is going to accumulate. So do you mind sharing a little bit about that process? How do you see that validation concept you're talking about is going to impact and influence the way we do transformation and change management, frankly?
Yes, so I think you know, you're a good straight person on these questions, because I think that's one of the opportunities that doing an impact assessment affords. It's both the internal thinking and pitching of the idea, creating the excitement within the organization, within your team, but then it's also the opportunity to market it as well. So somewhere back a year or two ago, I wrote a piece called "Marketing is Validation," and the idea was that marketing is the process of creating a change or exciting people to make a change, and through the process of assessing impact, you're basically preparing for the change. So the change is one of these things that you can, again, rally behind both internally and externally. So I think that's the opportunity here for basically any industry to take advantage of this concept of e-validation. Is the E is in some senses for emotional, so it's creating sort of this excitement or this commitment to. It's creating this commitment to the change that's about to come. So anyway, yeah, I could talk at length about medical devices and software aspects, but really the idea that I'm trying to move forward here is that this concept of e-validation, validating in advance, is applicable to our daily life. Us as a human.
Well, exactly. For everyone, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So the same concept works within your home corporation. That works at home. The idea of assessing the impact and assessing the outcome. So it's interesting. I have to mention my mother. So my mother, she wasn't good at math, but she was good at she could do partial differential equations, even though she didn't know she was doing them. She had to manage 6 kids, and she had to manage us and taught us the principles and our principles for life, and we would go out and make an impact based on those principles that we learned at home. Sometimes we would learn the lesson the hard way, but in effect, that's what what leaders are doing today is they're managing their stakeholders the same way my mother managed us and my father and the rest of the family. And you're basically, doing a set of consistent principles to manage the whole organization behind. And that's kind of the idea behind the concept of evalidation.
I love that. First of all, it's a concept that is applicable to everyone. It's important. And also when you said emotional part, that immediately brought it to me. It's like emotional intelligence aspects of it, how intelligently we are leveraging and astute about it, right? And how we're responding to it or how we're observing it. And then what do we do with that? And I love how actually our day-to-day life and those early upbringing with your mom are actually the same concepts and principles as managing, as you mentioned, your clients and your client portfolio, and someone who's been involved in that. It's just amazing how many things and concepts we don't think or we don't already understand. Well, we were doing this all along. They're just now labeled this way, right? How much of labeling we have in categorization, but it's essentially the same thing. So.
Yeah, and that's actually a great segue to the question that Joseph's handling, or that he's offering us here. How do I train my mind to make better decisions? And it's interesting that I took this class on decision making, and of course decision making involved things like decision trees and a big fancy process, and
too complicated, right?
Yeah,
it feels like I will never figure this out. It's like, why is this so complicated and complex?
Right, and that's kind of, so even though I wrote a lot of logic to sort of follow those paths of decision trees, I guess the concept that I'm promoting is the idea of you've got a set of 7 principles, and again, my software quality or my medical device quality domain is sort of like a set of principles, but if you could think of those as analogous to principles for a different organization, so you got about, I'm holding up 7. You've got about 7 principles, and if you believe what Dr. Miller talked about, the 7 ideas, you can hold 7 concepts in your brain simultaneously. So those are those 7 principles, and then maybe you've got about 7 stakeholders that you're thinking about. So you can think about 7 in 2 dimensions fairly rapidly. So how do you train your mind to do that? You basically ask yourself, with respect to your quality principles, how is it going to have an impact? Is it positive or negative? And in effect, you can teach yourself what I guess Gladwell called about thin slicing, and what Gerd Gigerenzer talks about gut feeling. You can basically, I know you can train yourself to sort of frame according to that 7 by 7 idea, and such that it becomes naturally like you can learn to thin slice, as Gladwell would say, almost without even thinking about it, because those principles are locked in, and you stick to them, and you don't convolute with hundreds of critical to quality concepts. So it's emotional, it's conceptual, and yes, I think you can train you, or some people would call it a hack, but I think you can hack your gut to actually make better decisions by understanding what your principles are.
And do you mind sharing what those principles that you're looking, when you mentioned the 7, which one of those of 7 you're using, and to help kind of put to overall big picture, so that we make sure, because a lot of times if you exclude certain things out of the equation, right, like how you, like I train my mind to play it forward, so like this particular decision may or may not bring me outcome and results I want, or if it does the result I want, how's it going to impact X, Y, and Z, and just looking from so multidimensional aspects. I love that you mentioned that, but it will be great to kind of really know what those principles are.
Yeah, again, I start with my baseline, and again, it's the difficult thing is the the quality domain of medical devices isn't necessarily the same as the quality domain of at
Personal.
home. So again, safety, efficacy, reliability, user experience. I'll just come out with another manufacturability, serviceability. These are all things that you basically say, is it going to have an impact on? And so, our famous author, Simon Sinek, the idea of the start with why, I guess that's how I derived what our principles would be, and what my principles would be sort of following a start with why type framework to come out with what are my principles. I also did another look at the decision making related to career, and I found a website that had about 20 different principles for making a career decision. Again, it violates my rule of 7, but those 20 were a big long list of things to consider, and I basically tick marked about 7 of them and use that as a framework for making decisions about a career. So I don't mean to oversimplify it. It certainly takes some practice to figure out what the principles are, and these quality factors are for you personally or your organization. But again, it's kind of like Sinek says start with why. I say start with evalidation, and the concept is figuring out what those principles are so that you can manage to your why.
That is brilliant, and I love that you expanded on that. So let's help Joseph here and everybody else that is listening to Serge are trying to do this on regular life decision making. So first of all, identify the problem, right? What we're trying to solve, what we want to achieve, or maybe it's not the problem. We're not solving from the problem. We just want to achieve specific target goal. So what it takes to get to that goal? Does it take a different skill set, different knowledge, different relationships? Validate 7 principles or 7 key elements in order to make that happen. Who did it before? How did they did it? What they had to do, right? And so many people, as they say, so many different ways how to reach the goal or how to resolve the problem, but just now figuring out those 7 elements from, as you pointed out, for career use, you had a 20, but for those 20, you narrowed down to 7 that were applicable to you and you felt that were the highest return on your time and investment on your goal, right? And then from there, what we did, we applied them, right? Just go and do step by step. And those principles you were mentioning using in technology space and computer science and also in technology in general, from working, making decisions at work, from just intellectual level, as well cross-organizational functional level. Now we have something that we can do, depending also what kind of contributors we are, right? Right now, we're just talking about general terms that you're mentioning finding a job, or you're mentioning, let's say, creating phenomenal film. I'm using my example. But then understanding what those principles will be applicable, e-validation with the why will give the output we desire. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I guess that's one of the things is I've tried to figure out the start with why framework, and a lot of times we'll get confused with the outcome being our why, and it's usually not. That's not the case. So again, the outcome is what you achieve as a result of sticking to your principles. And sort of the weird thing about the outcome is you don't necessarily know where you're going to end up, but if you stick to your principles, ideally you're going to end up someplace better because you've been consistent with your decision making. And that's kind of the, I use that the little mathematical E in the E validator and in all the E words that I've created, E-impact. It's the idea of consistency and doing things continuously, and such that consistency creates sort of like this exponential possibility, like the exponential number E for you as a human. You're consistent in your decision philosophy, your decision approach, and your decisions most of the time. So yeah, you might deviate off that nice straight line sometimes, but having a consistent set of principles that you're applying all the time gets you to where you're going faster than you would without being 7 principles driven.
Wow, that is so powerful. So it's almost like a core values. What you really are talking about is like a core values, isn't it? In a way, uh,
Exactly.
that we validate who am I, as let's say, who am I beside Izabela? Who am I as a leader? What types of values are I want? And the reason I'm saying, because I'm fascinated about leadership, who I wanted to be and who I wanted to stretch to be, right? So what is important to me from these different principles, and then how we, like, even just around leadership and around transformation, and what elements I wanted to exude, what I wanted it to be, and as a result, what I strive for, and then understanding now why. What is the motivating factor? A lot of people will say, oh, I want this or that, but again, it comes back to it, because that's the emotional charge. And I love, because emotional charge is always the one that lead us and help us to persevere when things get challenging and difficult, to not give up, to keep testing and keep going till we get there, right? So that is also why I feel like I love that e-validation, so powerful, because I can validate me and my choices and my decision. You validate yours. They might be complementary, they may not be, but on the end of the day, it's our own individual choice. And now as a team, we can bring that in organization, right? We can bring that across different teams and different sectors. And as a result, it's that sense of ownership, ultimately, owning that e-validation, and keep persevering during challenging times as we're seeing right now.
Yeah. So that's the key. Again, I'm reaching for my heart here, but it's feeling it. And that's, again, the emotional part of e-validation, that you internalize the feeling. Again, back to that idea of the gut feel. You know, once you've trained yourself and your gut tells you, am I on course or am I straying? And that's kind of the idea that you effectively, again, this is back to the hacking. You're hacking your behavior by establishing a set of principles that you execute to. So I think it's Horowitz that says you are what you do, and you are what you do. So if you do something,
not what you say, guys, not what you say. I've seen too many people saying a lot of things and doing completely opposite.
Right.
And just guess what? We're paying attention, we're watching. So I'm glad that Joseph is saying here, thank you, and that he liked that, which thinks he was a brilliant answer. So glad, Joseph, that you got your answer answered, and that was helpful. But with that in mind, I just wanted to say you were so spot on, and I just love that we can connect the dots between innovation and technology and disruption and all of these things that we're seeing, and transformation that is absolutely necessary right now, but still stay grounded in the truth and knowing, right? And have that kind of ground where we feel like no matter what else is shaking, no matter what else is happening, we have that very strong foundation through our why and e-validation.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, Izabela, I guess one of the things that I maybe as we sort of wind down the hour here, you know, we haven't talked about innovation and invalidation, and well, for one, I picked e-validation because who wants to be an invalidator? Seriously, but you know, so I was inspired by Clayton Christensen's writing and then writings as I read the things that he produced after the Innovator's Dilemma. But the thing that was so here's kind of the big idea, I guess, behind this concept of invalidation, that Christensen's book targeted an audience of managers, executives, consultants, all the people who are in the business of making big decisions, right? But in the one thing I guess he neglected, I wasn't in his audience, by the way. Didn't have that title, one of those titles when I read his book. But what I found out about the innovator's dilemma, which is, the innovator's dilemma is the dilemma: do I go with the new technology and take the risk, or do I stick with the old technology and be comfortable until I'm no longer comfortable? That's kind of what the innovator's dilemma is. In this era of digital transformation for all of us, we all have this potential to be innovators, and we all have this potential we all have this ability, I should say, to make decisions. And validation being usually the idea that I'm validating, saying yes, amen, to an idea. But as I studied the innovator's dilemma, the biggest problem is that the leadership in case studies that you'd see was that their biggest trouble was they couldn't invalidate when they had to. So I'll pick on Kodak, my way former employer, right?
Yeah.
So, they couldn't invalidate film soon enough, and by the time they invalidated it, it was too late to play catch up in the game. And I know it's one week I can debate with my friends over a couple of beers about, but that's really the dilemma that we all face is, are we going to go with the flow and say, yes, we're going to do what management's telling us to do? Or are we going to say, we're kind of overlooking something. The impact says that we could have, make an example. There could be a user experience issue that we have here. Are we sure that we want to take this route? And that's the difficulty, is knowing when to say no, knowing when to invalidate and take a different course. And then I guess lastly, the last word on the innovator's dilemma. Clayton Christensen was all about talking up disruptive technology and the opportunities with and potentially the pitfalls of disruptive technology. And I guess the thing that I came away with was when he talked about technology not as what most people think about technology. It's computers, it's what Elon Musk is doing, that's technology. But I guess the thing I came away with is the technology of today is it's human technology. It's our brains, it's our ability to make decisions. And I think the opportunity now as we go into this age of AI is we have that emotion that AI is not going to have. We're the technology that's going to coexist and make decisions with the AI such that the outcomes that we achieve are the outcomes we want to achieve. And we don't want it to be, well, the computer decided to, the car decided to. We as a human, I think, still want and should have that ability to intervene and make the right choice. Do that emotional validation that is the right thing to do.
I love it because things are not slowing down. Reality is what we're ready for. And if we always wait till we're ready, we'll not move the needle fast enough. We'll be obsolete. We have to question what we're actually doing. What are we solving? How is this translating to something tangible? Isn't making sense anymore. I see so many organizations doing things just because they're good at it and because they're comfortable. And they used to be, important and pertinent to their business years ago. But that's no longer. They continue to because it's just easy because you're on autopilot, right? But right now, we also need to question that aspect. Is it now necessary? Is it really needed? What else alternatively we could do? And you're spot on. Artificial intelligence will never actually slow down, will never go away. And it's just going to add more ways for us to complement our current infrastructure of business, our organizational charts and design, and everything that we're doing. And as a result, ultimate organizational effectiveness for why we exist, what we provide, and why we're even here, right? And how our reach, how big is our reach? Obviously, being part of the so many Fortune 500 companies and seeing the global expansion and reach, also seeing smaller startups that disrupted and created amazing solution for larger corporations. We see so much dance between all of it, and I think it's super exciting, don't you think?
Exciting times ahead, and happy to be a part of it, and hopefully happy to I guess be an influencer as we go forward in this.
Well, absolutely, most definitely, and it is such a great way to see someone who is so well, not only educated, but also very well read, who also apply different systems and questions the even thinking process, and as a result also thinking decision making. It's so refreshing to see that, Gregory, and I really want to kudos you and thank you for opportunity to get just to scratch a little bit surface today. But with this in mind, since we get into top of the hour, do you mind just giving a little quick reflection? What would you like to leave audience with for them? Just something that is so easy and applicable. How to question your decision making, or what to do in order to be better decision maker.
Yeah, I guess I think the thing that we need to accept is that decision making isn't this difficult thing. It's not for them to make decisions. We're all part of we're all decision makers as humans, and that decisions don't have to be as complex as using decision trees. I honestly believe that, again, pick your set of principles. It's pretty easy to do, like a qualitative, who am I and what do I believe? What are my beliefs? And work according to that. So don't be sold into this idea that it's, other people need to make decisions. We all have those opportunities to make decisions and influence, ourselves and the humanity around us. So it's as simple as 7 ± 2.
Fantastic. And then it's amazing journey to self-discovery, right? So more you'll discover, more clear you are, and with clarity you're going to gain so much more momentum, and that momentum is going to get you to places you never thought it's possible. So that's the reason why we're having these amazing guests like Gregory here, Mr. Keyes, sharing some golden keys for us of 7 principles and 7 validation elements, and they should be the keys validated principles. I cannot wait to see some of the new concept of Mr. Keyes. So Gregory, it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for taking your time in a busy day and things you're doing in upstate New York and New York, actually. So it's just fantastic to have this opportunity. And we're having also someone here that wants to say that they had a really a great time listening to all of this. Thank you for your participation. And I just wanted to say for everybody that listened, watched, comment, integrated with us, we want to just thank you for being with us. And we look forward to follow-up conversations. But everybody that would get so much value, like I did, please go connect with Gregory. You can find him directly on the LinkedIn, of course, on other social media, including Instagram, I believe on Facebook. But if you wanted to really deep dive intellectually, but also practically, Mr. Keyes is on the LinkedIn, right?
You bet.
Is that where you like important for you to connect with you?
LinkedIn's great. I appreciate that. Thank you, Izabela. Yeah,
absolutely.
My last simple statement, maybe instead of a long statement, my simple statement is how I close my blog when I write my blog. It's says to be valid and be an validator. So again, feel those emotions.
Yay! I love it. I love that. That is beautiful. Be valid and be validator, because only we know what is real and true to us, and then share that with the world, right? That is the other thing too. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. And look forward to follow up. We'll bring Mr. Keyes in the future as well. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks so much. Take care.